After an eviction occurs in Ohio, a lot of the times the landlords will end up leaving a whole ton of trash and property of the tenant out on the street corner. Now, one city is proposing that landlords will have to provide a dumpster to put all that garbage into. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have quite the interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of Toledo, Ohio. So Ohio, as I've mentioned many times before, is known to be a very landlord-friendly place, but they are making a proposed change to the way evictions are done. So right now, in Ohio at least, they're requiring landlords to put property of the tenant out on the corner or out in front of the property so that the tenant has the opportunity to retrieve it, right? But what this ends up being is, hey, there's a lot of trash, garbage, junk that is piled out on the street, and it looks bad. It just looks bad, okay? And the city says, hey, you know what? Maybe we should require the landlord to provide a dumpster so that the property from this tenant and the trash and the garbage and the stuff that the tenant doesn't want can be easily removed and that the streets don't look like crap. And, in a way, I kind of agree with it. And, it looks bad. It looks bad. But this is kind of, in my opinion, also a deal of like the walk of shame, where you put their crap out on the street corner, and maybe this will encourage others to actually pay their rent on time and not go through the horribly embarrassing process of eviction. So, yeah, while I do agree that it looks like garbage, I also at the same time want to shame these tenants for not paying their rent and having to put the landlord through this awful process in the first place. So, in some states, I will say when I was in Arizona in particular, they had a law that required me to put the tenant's property into storage after an eviction. So, I can't remember what the period of time was, and I know that a lot of other states have a similar law, but you have to hold their property in storage before you're finally able to dispose of it if the tenant doesn't come and collect it. Now, in my opinion, that puts a huge financial burden on the landlord. In the case of a dumpster, it's kind of similar, but, when you think about the fact that you're probably going to have to clear out the property anyway and get the dumpster anyway, that might not be such a bad thing. But I don't know. What do you think? But before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So, do you think that this is a good law? Do you think this sort of proposal is the sort of thing that landlords should be doing? Okay? Do you think that this should be required by the city? Put a comment below and let me know what you think. Now, let's get into the article and see what it says. This article is coming from WTOL.com, and it says, new ordinance would require landlords to provide dumpsters to address eviction blight in Toledo. Let's get into it.
Toledo City Council is working to take the trash out on irresponsible landlords.
Toledo and Toledoans are really fed up with the setouts that linger on street curbs for far too long.
City Council member Nick Komives and 5 others are working to require dumpsters or containers for eviction setouts. Komives says this is a common practice in other cities to keep blight down.
People do not deserve to walk out of their front door and have to look at trash just sitting on the curb for months at a time, weeks at a time.
He says when these piles sit, they tend to grow. Right now, if trash is set out and the city has to clean it up, it can cost more than $1,000 depending on the size of the pile.
Right now, we only have a mechanism to charge that property owner $150, which is not at all covering the cost of what we pay to go and clean that up.
He says the city requires bakeries, restaurants, and retail shops to provide their own dumpsters, so why not require landlords? Komive says the average cost for a dumpster in Toledo is $400, which could be an extra burden for landlords, but he says it's a part of doing business.
The reality is that sometimes there are going to be an additional cost for various things that occur. If you choose to evict a tenant, then you also have to choose to clean up your property.
But for some of those doing business, like City Council member and landlord Adam Martinez, it's not that simple.
There's always the unintended consequences of adding additional fees that can add for additional security deposit increases, increased in rent to cover the costs.
Martinez says he thinks there's an issue that needs to be addressed, but he's still not sure how it will be enforced. He says he believes the burden is on the landlord, but right now there's little a landlord can do to get this money back.
On top of the eviction costs on top of legal fees, lost rent, damage to property, set out costs, and we're adding a dump fee, in essence.
He says this could be harder on the smaller landlords rather than the larger and sometimes out of town ones.
All right, you saw the video. Now, what do you think? Okay, do you think this is a good proposal, or do you think that landlords should be allowed to continue doing what they are right now, which is sitting all the property, the junk from these tenants after an eviction, just out on the street, weather, everything raining down on it, okay? I don't know. I honestly don't know. In my opinion, the tenant usually is given plenty of an opportunity to move their stuff up out of the property long before an eviction occurs. They're given plenty of notice, they're given opportunity, and those who are requiring us to go in there and move it, well, usually it's because they got a whole bunch of junk that they don't know what to do with themselves, and they're hoping that we can take care of the problem for them. But I don't know if a city requirement for a dumpster, it depends. Like, dumpsters aren't expensive. Okay, I've gotten them many times for many of my rental properties, just cleaning them out after a good tenant who wasn't evicted moved, okay? And maybe I had to do some rehab to the property afterwards, whatever. But, dumpsters aren't expensive. It would probably make the area look a little bit more clean and neat. But, I just don't know. I don't really know if this is a good proposal or not, or if this will be a trap used to basically screw landlords over. And that's part of my problem with all new laws, is they use them as a trap to screw new landlords over. But anyway, before I go on to in this video, I came across a second article, right, that I thought I wanted to go over with you guys real quick. And it's a short one. So, the funny thing about this one is that it asks a question that a lot of people have differing opinions on, okay? And this article is coming from Bakersfield News Now, and it's a simple question, right? And the question is, do you think renters are treated fairly by landlords, right? Now, obviously, the majority of the people answering in this poll are renters, because it skews far to the, hey, landlords aren't treating their tenants fairly, right? But we know overall there are tens of thousands of landlords in every city. We're talking about the person going from renting a single room in their house all the way up to the people who own giant apartment complexes. So you can't convince me that all landlords are bad when there are just so many landlords out there. But anyway, if I'll put a link to this question in the poll right now. There's only 18 votes. So it hasn't been a very popular poll. 28% say yes. They do think that renters are treated fairly by landlords, while 72% say no. But like I said, this is 18 votes. So what I want you to do is go to this article. I'll put a link to the article in the description, right? And vote on it. Vote your true opinion. I don't care if you're for or against landlords, but I just want to see more responses than just 18 to a poll and a question like this.